When looking at specific nub variations, it is important to remember that when the mainstream narrative says that these are for lifting, that we look at the sizes of the nubs, look in comparison to this gentleman's head. A nub in specific comparison above him would have had to have been the size of a tree trunk. Now, that either means that the scale of person was different in respect to lifting, or we need to look at the fact that they didn't lift the larger blocks that are by this gentleman's legs. Now, does this not indicate, ladies and gentlemen, as we've looked at before, more of a language than a lifting block? The opposing nubs as well, ladies and gentlemen, are just not conducive for lifting. Why would you have two opposing, one at the top and one at the bottom? Two at the top, two at the bottom. It just doesn't make sense. So I think once and for all today we can say that the Menkure pyramid nubs were not for lifting. Now, that's not to say that some were not, ladies and gentlemen, of the ancient alternative view, because as we've discovered, the nubs are a multi-layered language, functional, and also have different meanings across the world. But the same engineers or teachers must have taught that skill. Now, can we find these nubs in the Great Pyramid, ladies and gentlemen, of the ancient alternative view? Well, ladies and gentlemen, of course there are. Some of the most standardized examples of the nubs that we can find are the circle-topped nubs. You can find examples in Peru that are eerily similar to this one on the Great Pyramid. Now, this must be conducive of similar builders. Maybe they were later, maybe they were earlier. The fact remains, though, ladies and gentlemen, that the portcullis chamber within the Great Pyramid does hold a nub. There is one of three images of this portcullis. One is a schematic, and the other one shines a light over the top of the nub, which you can see clearly here that these exist within the Great Pyramid. So, were the nub architects, engineers, the builders? There are even ornate nubs seen high here as well, just like you would find in Indian examples also. Just one hidden there. It isn't part of the language and it may be functional, but it's certainly a nub, ladies and gentlemen, of the ancient alternative view. Another ornate singular nub can be shown next to the header here, ladies and gentlemen, of the ancient alternative view. There are many examples of the nubs within Egypt. So why are we looking at all of them, Phil? What's actually going on here today? The Keeper of Genesis, Robert Bauval and Graham Hancock. Chapter 16, Message in a Bottle. Together with the ancient texts and rituals that are linked to them, could the vast monuments of Giza necropolis have been designed to transmit a message from one culture to another? A message not across space, but maybe across time. Egyptologists reply to such questions by rolling their eyes and hooting derisively. Indeed, they would not be Egyptologists, or at any rate they could not long remain within that profession, if they reacted with anything other than scorn and disbelief to suggestions that the necropolis might be more than just a cemetery, that the Great Sphinx might significantly predate the epoch of 2500 BC, and that the pyramids might not just be royal tombs. By the same token, no self-respecting Egyptologist would be prepared to consider, even for a moment, the outlandish possibility that some sort of mysterious message might have been encoded into the monuments. So whom should we turn to for advice when confronted by what we suspect may be a message from a civilization so far distant from us in time as to be almost unknowable? The Anti-Cipher. The only scientists actively working on such problems today are those involved in the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. They endlessly sweep the heavens for messages from distant civilizations, and they have therefore naturally had to give some thought to what might happen if they ever did identify such a message. According to Dr. Phillip Morrison of the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, to begin with, we would know very little about it. If we received it, we would not understand what we were getting. But we need to have an unmistakable signal, full of structure, full of challenge. The best people would try to decode it, and it will be easy to do because those who have constructed it would have made it easy to decode. Otherwise, there would have been no point. This is anti-cryptography. I want to make a message for you who have never got in touch with any symbols of mine. No clue, no key. Nevertheless, you'll be able to read it. I would have to fill in full of clues and unmistakable clever devices. In his book Cosmos, Professor Carl Sagan of Cornell University makes such the same point, and does so curiously enough with reference to the ancient Egyptian hieroglyphic system. He explains that the Egyptian hieroglyphs are in significant part a simple substitution cipher, but not every hieroglyph is a letter or syllable. Some are pictographs. When it came to translation, the mix of letters and pictographs caused some grief for interpreters. In the early 19th century, however, a breakthrough was made by French scholar Champollion, who deciphered the famous Rosetta Stone, a slab of black basalt bearing identical inscriptions in Egyptian hieroglyphs and in Greek. Since Champollion could read the Greek, all he needed was some kind of key to relate specific hieroglyphs to specific Greek words or letters. This key was provided by the constant repetition in the Greek text of the name of Pharaoh Ptolemy V, and an equal number of repetitions in the Egyptian text of distinctive oblong enclosure, known as a cartouche, containing a repeated group of hieroglyphs, as Sagan comments. The cartouches were the key, almost as though the pharaohs of Egypt had circled their own names to make the going easier for Egyptologists 2,000 years in the future. What a joy it must have been for him, being the only person to be able to decode and speak to the ancients. I wonder whether they'd hidden another secret language within the hieroglyphs, ladies and gentlemen. Let's go and take a look. When we look at these, if you look at the lines, which might I add, if we just make this a little bit bigger, ladies and gents. There we go. You can see that this is granite and it's lined. Now, if we just think for one moment, the universal nub shape, which is inverted in this case, is like a half sun, and you've got them here. See how they're lined apart? Now, obviously these are hieroglyphics, but these shapes are very, very similar, aren't they, ladies and gentlemen, than the nub shapes that we get. Now, if we single those out and go and have a look at them looking a little bit more like this, then you can see that it singles out the nub shapes. Now, if this is more the cipher than the language, then we could surmise that hidden within the hieroglyphs is a different language. Now, we've studied all over the world. We know that there's nubs everywhere in the world. It's very difficult to distinguish which were the earliest of our nubs. Was it the Peruvian examples that we see at the Coricancha and all over Saskatchewan and Ollantaytambo and so on and so forth? But if we surmise that the Great Pyramid and the earlier hieroglyphs are some of the oldest writings as well in the world, then maybe the ancient wisdom keepers of today and yesteryear hid a language within the hieroglyphics. And it's very odd that they're shaped similarly to our nubs, ladies and gentlemen. So we've been doing a little bit of digging here at the Ancient Alternative View to see whether we can come up with any other examples that look like this. Now, if we have a look at this set of specific hieroglyphs here, ladies and gentlemen, then we can surmise lots of different things. You're almost going to have to imagine a lot of the hieroglyphics taken away. And if we look at some of the configurations, although a little bit tarnished over time, these are perfect, what we would call standardized nub shapes. And also within a lot of the circular shapes you have little tiny nubs. Now they're all over the hieroglyphs in Egypt, and if we can surmise, and we're doing a lot of that today, surmising, but the ancient wisdom keepers of Egypt did suggest that there was a hidden ancient language within the hieroglyphs, and all over these lots and lots of different representations of the standardized nub shapes and circular nubs that we find all over the world. Now we all know that the Egyptians, or let's say pre-Egyptians, were very, very clever at monitoring the stars. Now if these are ciphers rather than the language itself, then maybe we are holding the cipher to the ancient language of the wisdom keepers, ladies and gentlemen, of the ancient alternative view. Now, if there is a cipher for the language hidden within the hieroglyphs in ancient Egypt, and we also surmise that the Nub language around the world may coincide with this, or the other way around, we have to look at the fact that the ancient Egyptians or the pre-Egyptians could have been looking at magnetic fields and power. They were obviously well equipped at geometry, mathematics. What were they looking for? It looks to me like they were looking for magnetic fields. And if that's the case, and the cipher is within the hieroglyphs, maybe we're waiting for the message to decipher, rather than we're trying to find the language out of the nubs. It's just another thought process, ladies and gentlemen. So we have to look outside the box here at the ancient alternative view, and that is what we are doing, to decipher the nub language and also to see whether it holds the key to ancient power. I hear you all screaming, how on earth could there have been power when all we used was copper chisels, sticks and stones in our ancient past? Well, here's an image from ancient Egypt. It's within granite. It shows how fine with a small needle that this line work actually is. This is 6 representations of the Dendera star from the Dendera temple. I've been studying this with Shermanator Osborne, and it seems along the sides here we have a small addition to the star. Now, the reason that I'm showing you this on Nub Language Part 5 is that this into granite, literally the power that would have been required to do this on the finest level, I leave open to you, ancient alternative view. I surmise that these small stars are a representation of a lost power to us, ladies and gentlemen, in the ancient alternative view, because I don't think our scientists today could replicate these. Now I hear you all screaming, how on earth would that have been done, ancient alternative view? Well, I don't know is the question and the answer to that. I surmise that even our finest diamond cutting tipped equipment, even our best water jetting equipment, wouldn't be able to do this. So I ask you, if there was no power, if our ancients had no way to have power, how is this possible? Let alone the functionality and the capabilities of what the pyramid structures would have been able to do. Now we've looked at today, ladies and gentlemen, different examples of the nubs, different examples of technological aspects that would have been used to prove that there was power in our ancient past. We keep hunting for the answers to the nub language. Is it the cipher that the ancients left us within the hieroglyphics of ancient Egypt? Or, ladies and gentlemen, is it a stone nub language that we are yet to decipher? I leave these questions with you, Ancient Alternative. So the nub language plot thickens, ladies and gentlemen of the Ancient Alternative view. We know they're worldwide, and we know they're hidden within the hieroglyphics of Egypt, as said by the ancient wisdom keepers of Egypt. Were they pre-Egyptian? Were these people hiding a secret language within the plateau that we also can see around the world? Ladies and gentlemen, I leave the decision to you to open your minds and work out why these buildings were built so enigmatic. Was there electronic power, electrical power, where a cipher was hidden? I believe that this is true, ladies and gentlemen, and I'd love to hear your opinions. And thank you very much indeed for watching the Ancient Alternative View.